So, what's the real price of a secret formula or a logo the whole world recognizes? How about a patent that literally changes everything? These are what we call intangible assets. They're invisible, but they're worth billions, sometimes trillions. And for huge global companies and tax authorities, trying to put a number on these ideas is one of the biggest, most complex challenges in finance today. So, let's peel back the curtain and see how the official rulebook says it should be done. I mean, this is really the heart of the problem, isn't it? When a company's most valuable stuff is invisible and you can move it from one country to another with just the click of a mouse, how do you fairly tax the money it makes? And maybe even more important, where do you tax it? We're going to break it all down. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to take a deep dive into the official international playbook, the OECD's transfer pricing guidelines. We'll start with the foundational rules, get a clear definition of what these assets even are, then try to solve the ownership puzzle, look at the sheer difficulty of valuation, and finally connect all the dots to see why this is so important for the global economy. Okay, first things first. Before we get into the weeds, we have to establish the one single bedrock principle that governs every single transaction we're about to discuss. Everything comes back to this one core idea. This right here, this is what's called the arm's length principle. And honestly, it's the absolute cornerstone of international tax. It basically means that different parts of the same multinational company have to pretend they're total strangers. They have to deal with each other as if they were independent businesses negotiating a deal. The whole point is to stop a company from, say, selling a billion-dollar patent to its own subsidiary in a tax haven for just one symbolic dollar, all just to move profits around. So, we've got the main rule down. But to actually apply it, we need to be crystal clear about what we're pricing in the first place. So, what exactly is an intangible, according to the experts? Now, the key thing to get here is that this isn't some dusty old accounting term. For tax purposes, the test is all about economics. You can think of it like a simple three-part checklist. 1, is it something non-physical? 2, can you actually own or control it? And 3, would some other independent company be willing to pay you to use it? If you get a yes for all 3, boom, you're dealing with an intangible. And believe me, this covers a huge range of stuff. You've got the obvious assets, right? Like a patent for a new medicine or a world-famous trademark. But it also includes things that are less obvious, but can be incredibly valuable, like proprietary know-how. Think a secret manufacturing process. Or even the goodwill and reputation a company has built with its customers over decades. But, and this is a really crucial point, the guidelines also draw a very sharp line in the sand. Things you can't really own or control don't count. For example, the fact that a giant corporation can get bulk discounts on supplies. That's a group synergy, not an intangible asset. Or the fact that you operate in a country with a lot of wealthy customers. That's just a characteristic of the market. These things definitely have value, but you can't own them, so you can't put a price on transferring them. Okay, now this is where things get really fascinating. Because just having a piece of paper that says your subsidiary in a tax haven legally owns a patent, well, that doesn't automatically mean it gets to keep all the profits that flow from it. This quote cuts right to the heart of the matter. It's telling tax authorities all over the world to look past the legal paperwork and analyze the economic reality. They have to ask a simple but incredibly powerful question. Who is actually doing the work and taking the risks that create and maintain all that value? And this table just lays it out perfectly. Look at that top row. You have a holding company that legally owns the patent, but it does zero research and development, and it takes on zero risk. It's basically just a filing cabinet. Now look at the second row. The R&D company does all the brilliant research, it employs all the scientists, it bears all the risk of failure. The OECD is very clear. The holding company gets a small fee for its administrative work, but the R&D company, the one that created the real value, is entitled to the lion's share of the profits. It's the absolute classic example of substance over form. And, this isn't just guesswork. The guidelines provide this comprehensive 6-step framework to figure it all out. You start by identifying the assets and risks, you look at the legal contracts, but then, and this is the key, you get to step 3, where you analyze who is actually performing the important functions. You have to confirm that what the contracts say is happening matches what's happening in reality. Only then can you figure out the true transaction and put a fair arm's-length price on it. All right, so we know who should get the profits, but that brings us to the next massive question. How much profit are we even talking about? And this is where we hit another huge challenge, trying to put a number on something that can seem, well, priceless. Yeah, and the rulebook is pretty honest about why this is so difficult. I mean, think about it. You can't just go online and look up the market price for a world-changing patent, right? A market for it doesn't exist. And often you've got a whole bundle of different intangibles and teams from all over the world contributing to one product's success. It can be a really complex web to untangle. But even with all that complexity, what's the one thing you always come back to? You guessed it, the arm's length principle. No matter how messy it gets, the analysis always has to circle back to this one fundamental question. Even if you're just doing it as a thought experiment, you have to figure out what two independent companies, each acting in their own best interest, would have agreed to. So how do you actually do that in practice? Well, the guidelines have their favorites. The gold standard is to find a comparable deal that happened out in the real world between two unrelated companies. If that's impossible, then a profit split, which divides the profits based on who actually did what, is often the next best choice. But you know what they really don't like? A cost-based approach. And it makes perfect sense, right? The amount of money you spend to develop an idea often has absolutely no connection to its eventual billion-dollar value. Okay, we have been deep in the technical details. So let's pull the camera all the way back now and look at the big picture and see why getting this right has such a massive impact on the entire global economy. So why does all this technical stuff matter so much? Because it's a direct counterattack against a huge global issue known as BEPS. That's base erosion and profit shifting. That's really just a fancy way of describing the practice of using legal loopholes to shift profits away from countries where the value is created and into countries where they'll pay very little tax. These OECD rules we've been walking through, they are designed to be the frontline defense to make sure profits are taxed where the real economic work actually gets done. And all of this leaves us with a final, pretty deep question to think about. In an economy where our most valuable assets are just ideas, things that exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time, how do we make our national tax systems, which are built on the idea of physical borders, line up with that new reality? It's a fundamental tension, and it's one that will continue to shape global economics for years to come.